It's comical to me that I got trolls that are like, yeah, last year you said, last year, Gottlieb, this is the voice of the internet dork, right? George Kittle can't block. He's a bad blocker. Not what I said. I said he's not really a blocker. He's a great pass catcher who has bought in to their scheme where you have to get off people and get down the field and block. For what they do for a guy who's a great pass catcher, he's quite good as a blocker. And it was mostly in comparison to Gronk, who, oh yeah, by the way, ask anybody who watches Tampa's film that while Gronk can't get out of a break anymore, you know what he can still do? Block. The best blocking tight ends in the NFL you have never heard of. Do you know why? Because they don't catch passes. That's where Rob Gronkowski was different. That was what the discussion was about. But that was actually off of it was like a side topic we talked about with Cowherd, off a discussion I had with a couple of NFL front office people. Actually talking to people inside the profession, which is the opposite of, Jay Williams saying that LeBron should have shot over 3 or 4 guys on Friday night instead of passed the ball to a wide open Danny Green. Like, that's just hot taker, silly talk, trying to get attention stuff. What's comical about that play was right before the play happened, my son said, "Where's Caruso?" And I was like, "Now you take Caruso out and you put Kentavious Caldwell-Pope in and you put Danny Green in." He's like, "Why?" I said, "Because the ball's not going to go to offense. They're not going to go to defense. Those guys, Caruso's a defensive player. Rondo's a defensive player or a full court player. In the half court, it's going to be LeBron, and he wants a ball screen, and we know exactly, who he wanted to go after. He was going after a mismatch. Do you know where he was going? What mismatch he was going after? Pretty obvious. Duncan Robinson, whom he got. So they double team the ball. He passes to the open shooter, misses a shot. Like, that's basketball 101. Go at the weakest defender with your best player. That's what they did. If whoever overhelps, that's the open guy. If you're a non-shooter, you cut. If you're a shooter, you spot up, get to your spot. Danny Green's more of a corner three-point shooter, but he was wide open. It was a good shot. It wasn't a great pass, and LeBron owned it as much, and it wasn't a great shot. He nearly airballed it. I've heard it all from guys like Stephen A. When Jon Gruden got the job, they overpaid him. It was $100 million. He doesn't know what he's doing. It's a disaster. How can you trade away Khalil Mack? I'm reading it. Then they trade Amari Cooper. What are they doing? I'm reading a website right now, sportscasting.com. I've never heard of it. I just happened to Google Jon Gruden mistake. And somebody named Stephen Sheehan wrote an article in April 2020 about the 10-year, $100 million contract, which is going to be a mistake. And then I watched the Raiders yesterday. And look, anyone who is realistic about the NFL draft in 2020, 2019, you're like, well, if you want to pick out individual picks that the Raiders have missed on, you'd be right. Hey, it is absolutely fair for you to say, hey, I look at this pick, I look at that pick, I don't love it. Do you know who goes 7 for 7 if they have 7 NFL draft picks? That would be 0. Like, the game is the same in college football and recruiting as it is in the NFL with drafting. It's a volume deal, right? Because some guys, and look, you have to do a ton of background research. Some guys implode because of personal issues. Some guys implode because they don't actually have the speed that you need, and it's hard to evaluate them at their level, or they get injured, or you change schemes and they only fit a certain scheme. But the idea is generally the more opportunities you get with young draft picks and you educate yourself as well as you can on prospects, your hit rate's somewhere in the 66% variety. Free agency, it's a little bit harder. It's like a 33% hit rate. How do I know these numbers? NFL people have told me. All right. You need to hit more on your first round picks. It's a higher hit rate there. But it's generally 2/3 of the draft picks live up to whatever billing you have when you draft them. Perfect example. Okay. What's Farrell's first name? Cleveland Farrell. He is a good player. Okay. But clearly with Josh Allen drafted behind him, okay, Cleveland Farrell went, I think, 4th overall. Josh Allen, I think, was the next pick with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Allen's a better player. Right? But Cleveland Farrell's a good player and supposedly a great chemistry guy, and their locker room has really good chemistry. Now, Max Crosby was a 6th-round pick, and I haven't gone through and looked at Jacksonville's 5th or 6th-round picks, but I guarantee he's better than whoever Jacksonville got in the 5th and 6th round. The point is that you're going to hit some, you're going to miss some. But the plan is to get as many picks and to remake yourself and to build around a solid, steady quarterback and figure out if you give him enough weapons, if he can do just enough to beat the other team. They gave him a running back last year, and they got Ruggs this year. With Ruggs healthy, their offense looks completely different. And the defense isn't great, but it's getting better. It's getting more talented. And when they had Khalil Mack, they weren't a good defense. They had a great player. Okay? They had one great player. Look, he got a heat for trading Amari Cooper. I don't know if any of their wide receivers are as good as Amari Cooper, but I can tell you this, that if you have to pay Amari Cooper $100 million, which they didn't want to, that would change everything. And that pick ends up becoming Ruggs, becomes a very, very talented, far lesser paid, healthy, young wide receiver. Now, he wasn't healthy always, but yes. When you talk to NFL people and he got the job, most everybody's like, yeah, eventually that'll work. He's a really good football guy who happened to be a kind of quirky guy on TV. I think people lost track of Jon Gruden. They're like, oh, these are just quirks and this is just for like, no, he was always like that. He wasn't playing a character. He's just football guy. Like the Jon Gruden quarterback camp, like when he bring guys in, that was because he actually would watch film, talk to guys, basically do mock drafts. Like that's all he does. And he was waiting for the opportunity. The only reason that they had to pay him $100 million was the crazy money he was making and was going to make from ESPN. If he was right now, the Raiders actually got him at a discount. Because you know what would have happened had he stayed at ESPN? Romo gets 17, he's going to get 18. Or somewhere in the neighborhood. Instead, he got somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 a year for 10 years. Which at the time felt like a lot of money, but in order to get a guy to change, he's a lifetime appointment. That was like a Supreme Court appointment. Lifetime appointment on Monday Night Football because he was really, really good and really well prepared and totally knew the sport and was he was the new age Madden. The only way to get him off of that perch is to overpay him for far too long. And you know what? They probably end up underpaying him. Because the plan is working. The Raiders are good. They are young. They are getting better. They are competing in every game. They've played against a ridiculous schedule, and right now, they got their head above water. So all of you who said it wouldn't work, it was dumb, see, league had passed him by, how can you sit in a booth for 10 years, and now can you trade away Khalil Mack and trade Amari Cooper? This guy right here told you, like or dislike the Raiders, the plan makes complete sense, and eventually it'll make them a really good team. Will make them a great team? I don't know. I don't know if Derek Carr's a great quarterback. I don't know if they can, to take that next step to being an elite team, you got to do it week in, week out. But they made the playoffs once in like 19 years. And it was the weirdest year. They went for it on 4th down a bunch of times. You know, they went for 2. They won a bunch of crazy, crazy games. And if you remember back, the rest of the teams in the division were all kind of dysfunctional. Right? Now the division is pretty darn good. Chargers, notwithstanding, with a bunch of injuries. Denver, obviously, a bunch of injuries. And they go in and beat Kansas City and Kansas City, granted with no fans, but they outscored Kansas City and Kansas City. And pick off Pat Mahomes a couple times in key spots. If you don't think it's going to work, the Raiders have passed you by. The league hasn't passed him by.